Welcome to the Orange County Department of Education Virtual College Fair, brought to you by California Out-of-State and International College Fairs. We're so excited to have you participating in this event. My name is Jasmine. I'm going to serve as the facilitator for our session today. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping announcements. The first announcement, your camera and microphone are off, so we are unable to see or hear you. Second announcement, you can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenter at any point throughout our session today. Third announcement, this is just one of a few different sessions that we're offering, so feel free to visit the schedule on the website. And finally, this presentation is being recorded and will be available at strivescan.com/COSI. I'd now like to turn it over to our first presenter, Dr. Maggie Parke from Study in Wales.
Thank you, Jasmine. Hello, I'm Maggie. Let me share my screen first of all, and then we'll get started. I also want to make sure that I can share my screen and still see the Q&A, because that is like the vital way that I like doing these sessions. So at any point, if you want to have a chat with me or ask me questions, yeah, I won't be like, okay, now it's time for questions. Feel free to have them listed in there as they come up to you. Let me see if I can pull that tab up. Here we go. Okay, firstly, if I could just ask the folks that are in the room, if you're happy to share, if you could just let me know if you have any pertinent, driving questions right now. Like, why are you here? Is your kid interested? Are you interested? Are you a parent? Are you an advisor? Are you a student? What do you think you're studying? Anything you kind of want me to be aware of, because I can talk around this topic a lot, but I'd much rather make it more pertinent specifically to you. So I'll try to make it as useful as possible. And if you're watching this later on a recording, my contact details are at the end. So I'm more than happy to get in touch with you another time, or you can always reach out to me as well. Okay. Looks like I can't have the Q&A open while I chat. So I'll just check in with it now and again, or Jasmine, if you're able to just kind of keep an eye on it and let me know if there's anything pressing while I'm talking, but then if it breaks or at the end, I'll just go through and see what questions are there.
Perfect.
Okay, so that's all right.
I said perfect. I'll do that.
Fantastic. Okay, so first of all, let me tell you a bit about Study Abroad, a bit about myself, and a bit of an overview of what we'll talk about. Flip that, about myself first. So I am Maggie Parke. I am from Study in Wales. And I'm very sorry I don't have the British accent. I think people are always so disappointed when I start talking and I don't have a British accent. But I am from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I studied abroad in the UK when I was 20 years old. So I did my undergraduate in the United States in Virginia, and I did a semester abroad in Wales when I was 20. And I loved it. I almost went back to finish my undergrad there, but I went back to Virginia and finished my bachelor's, and then I came back to Wales for my master's, and I stayed for my PhD. Main reason I went over there was academics. I stayed for location and cost, so I'll run through those. But I do now work for Study in Wales. So I worked in admissions at a Welsh institution for about 10 years, 12 questionable. Some of that was when I was a PhD student, and then it turned into a full-time gig. So I did admissions for Bangor University for a long time, and I took care of the entirety of the Americas. So Canada, US, Central America, South America. Really fantastic job. Loved the work, loved meeting those different students, but definitely started to see that there was more frustration from students about what they weren't able to achieve in the US system and what they could with us, and just kind of helped hone some of the things that I thought might help big picture wise. So now I work for Study in Wales. So now I help promote Welsh education generally. So we have 8 universities, which I'll walk you through, but I just wanted to kind of prep you to be like, everything I'm talking about here is going to be about Wales, because that's what I do and what I know. But I do have a couple of slides about Europe and about Canada, I work really closely with the universities in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and New Zealand. So I'm very happy to chat about generals of those things as well. And we're generally a pretty friendly network. So if you do have interest in other nations beyond Wales, it's not like you can't ask me. It's not, I don't know, I just don't get the feeling it's like a lot of the US systems. Like if you said, I really want to go study in Otago, New Zealand, I'd be like, great, I'll call Du Bois and I'll give you, his contact information. You can have a chat with him. So yeah, we're pretty much a support each other friendly institution group. So let me just run through some of the things about studying abroad. Why should it happen? How does it work? For me, it was academics. I was at master's level, but even at undergrad, if you know what you want to study, it's very focused on your subject. It's hard to do general education overseas. There aren't a lot of institutions internationally that will have undecided majors or liberal arts degrees. There are some, absolutely. But it tends to be more common for it to be subject specific and subject focused. So whatever you want to study is all that you study. So if you're studying psychology, the first year of your degree will just be psychology. You will also take writing comprehension, research skills, speaking skills, things like that, but it'll be taught within the School of Psychology. But there's no like gym requirement, no French requirement. It is just focused on psychology. You can take those other things for like personal interest, but it won't have anything to do with your degree, your GPA, any of that. So it's very focused. So I think that's a huge pro for a lot of people, a lot of students who are like, I don't ever want to take that class again. I just want to do creative writing. I just want to do bioscience. So they get to focus and target in. You can do joint honors degrees, which is kind of like a major and a minor. So there's an opportunity to be a bit broader, but you get to do what you want to do. Location, you get to go overseas. It's awesome. I mean, I'll show you some pictures. I basically lived in Narnia for, how long have I been here? 17 years now. It's a wonderful opportunity to go to a new place, have these amazing adventures, grow as a person, but do it with all of the support that comes along with being a university student. Because all these universities have incredible support systems for international students, for students generally, mental health, academic health, travel, accommodation, finding a job, opening a bank account, getting a doctor's appointment, like all that living abroad stuff, they'll help you out with. And just, becoming an adult, like 18 to 22, there's a lot of growth there. So there's a lot of support there to help students along their way. You just get to do it in a really cool new place. Cost was the main reason I stuck around. I have another slide about this later, but like the schools I was looking at in the US were $48,000 a year, $52,000 a year. And my institution was $12,000 a year. And after scholarships, I paid $7,000 a year. And for that, we were a FAFSA school. So I filled out, the FAFSA loans and stuff. And I got US federal loans to pay for my degree overseas. So yes, I was in debt, but I was in debt about $35,000 at the end of a PhD. I'm okay with that. And again, I live in Middle Earth. So it was pretty great to be able to make that financial investment, but grow so much as a person and not be as in debt as some of my peers were at some of the US institutions. So yeah, very low cost, much more affordable. Time, it's a shorter degree at most institutions, definitely in the UK and a lot of European, some Canadian. They're 3-year programs. So it's 3 years for a bachelor's, 1 year for a master's. So in 4 years, you could have your master's, whereas in the US, that can take you 6 or 7 years. They're completely equal degrees. Everything will transfer back. If you have a bachelor's of English from the UK, it will be the same as a bachelor's of English in the US. The only things that are tricky are certifications. So it's the same as if you were like a teacher in California and you wanted to move to Oregon, you have to get recertified in that state. So you just have to do the research to see what that certification would look like. And sometimes it's nothing. You just have to like fill out a piece of paper. Other times it's go back to school for 2 years. So just know, like, nursing is one of those. Just know if that's what you want to study, you have to know how that would be received in your home state. But that's like maybe a dozen degrees out of 250. The actual degree, the bachelor's of nursing or the bachelor's of education or whatever, that's completely equal. The other things that are phenomenal, I put support on there twice. I guess we're super supportive. The other thing I would highlight is the transparent application process. I'll go through this as well in a bit more detail, but we're not like the US. If you email me, this is if I worked at Banger, if you emailed me with your transcript and said, this is what I want to study, I would be able to tell you like myself if that was going to get in or not, because we know what GPA we're looking for. We know what kind of student we're looking for. And it's really just based on academic ability, not on, extracurriculars and things like that. We're interested in those. We want to read those. But really, it's such a transparent process that you could email me and say, would I get in? I'm interested in this, and show me your grades. And I'd probably be able to say yes or no. And if it was no, I'd then be able to feed back to you saying, I really need to see this. You still have time to take that class or look at that or add this work experience or something to kind of build up that application. So just so you know where Wales is, because this is the group that I work with. We're part of the UK, but think of it like a state. We're a separate state. England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, excuse me, are the 4 states that make up the UK. But it is its own country. So I know it gets confusing when you think about where we are and what that means, but think of it like a state, but it is technically a country. Has its own culture, has its own language. There's no like border patrol between Wales and England or anything like that. It's a very small Celtic nation, absolutely lovely place to live, stunning scenery with more castles per square mile than anywhere in Europe, and regular flights to Europe. I actually just landed this morning. I was in New Hampshire yesterday, and I flew through Munich to get back here today. So it was an hour and a half flight to Munich, which is pretty phenomenal. And then the train system's phenomenal as well. So getting around the UK is just lovely. You can pop over to Dublin for the day. You can go over to Liverpool for the afternoon. If you're down in South Wales, you can go to London in 2 hours on the direct train. So nice, well-connected, but lowest cost of living in the UK. Incredibly safe place to live as well. So there's a lot of perks of living in Wales. I'm a little partial. We have 8 universities that run the gamut from more like traditional established high profile universities to universities that were community colleges 20 years ago and have now transitioned into being full-on university, but definitely have like more of a focus on some of the more trade type elements and things like that. So this I mentioned before, study what you want. There's no gen ed requirements. We're very transparent on our entry requirements, and up to 4 times cheaper than London for cost of living, and tuition fees are between $14,000 and $28,000 a year. So that's, again, at the 8 universities. It'll depend which course you're taking. Course is a major. So it depends which major you're taking and which university. So if you were doing medicine at Cardiff, that will be your most expensive option. That will be about $28,000 a year. But if you're doing a humanities degree at a different university, or maybe even a Cardiff, it's going to be more on the 14,000 end. And then FAFSA is eligible at 7 of our 8 universities. The 8th is currently in process and expects to be approved by the end of this year. And it is free to apply to our universities. Or if you use UCAS, it's very, very cheap. It's like $40 to apply to 5 universities. But it's, again, not like the US. We do not do that whole like charge $100 per application thing. So there's no harm in putting in an application to a UK institution. Main focus about UK, it is a 3-year program, the 1-year master, so it is that shorter, more focused option. But beyond that, it's really similar to a US experience. There's a few wonderful differences though. So housing is one. You have your own room at pretty much every institution. There's very few times that there would be shared dorm rooms. In most of them, you'll have your own bathroom as well. It's like a small hotel room, and that's just standard. We just don't really have that kind of shared room mentality. And then there's also lots of off-campus housing, and there's offices on university campuses that will help you find off-campus housing, review contracts, things like that. So there's a lot of support in finding accommodation. I loved it. I was actually an RA for 4 years during my grad school days, and I lived in the dorms for 4 years. It was great. Had my own room, my own bathroom, really good group of friends, right next to the gym, right next to the tennis courts, 24/7 security. There's a mail room, there's 2 cafes, coffee shop, all that stuff that you need was right there. And our quality of life and living is really high ranked. Student satisfaction, 4 of the top 20 are Welsh universities. Has a very rich cultural heritage, international experience, and as I said, gateway to Europe. You're also able to work in the UK if you are studying overseas as an international student. So if you come for a degree in England, Wales, Scotland, you're able to work up to 20 hours a week on your student visa. So you can get a part-time job. I worked at the movie theater my first year over here. And then if you want to work more, you can do full-time during holidays and summer breaks. And then if you do a graduate degree in the UK, when you finish your graduate degree, you are allowed, so if you're planning to do 4 years anyway and include that master's year, which is what most of our US students do, 4 years, but it has a master's attached to it, then you can stay for an additional 2 years. So they have a visa that if you finished a graduate degree, you can just stay on, no questions asked, you can get a job in anything you want. So then you can stick around and give yourself a bit more work experience internationally as well before either looking to stay or returning back to your home country. Student life is really similar to US institutions overseas. And again, these are all Welsh examples, but it is the same in most Canadian institutions, the rest of the UK and New Zealand and Ireland and things like that. They're going to have students' unions, lots of clubs, lots of societies, lots of activities, trips, concerts on campus, nightclubs, parties, things like that. Like that kind of life just is there. They will have a students' union that organizes student government that makes sure that there are people in place that help lobby for things that improve that campus. There's study abroad options. So if you do decide to do a full degree while overseas, you can actually go abroad. Some campuses, it's included in your 3-year program. It's very strict about where you can go because you have to make sure you take the exact classes that would fulfill the criteria of that 1 year on your home campus. But if you're interested in adding a 4th year, a lot of campuses now have this international experience year. So you don't pay tuition, you just cover your costs, but you get an extra year attached to your university and you can take one of the exchange spaces to any of their partners. And you can take any classes you want, even outside of your major. So it's an international experience year that just kind of is sandwiched in the middle of your degree, and you go spend a year in Spain or Korea or the US if you want, and you can add that in. Lots of sports. It's different than the US. We don't have like D1, D3, things like that, but it's all kind of club sports. So you have access to everything, but it's still really competitive. It's really well organized. It's definitely a priority on most campuses. So there's good facilities and things like that. And most institutions do not have classes on Wednesday afternoons. So Wednesday afternoons are when you would compete against other universities. So it's just kind of like a given in the whole of the UK that that's what this structure is. You're also going to have dedicated international student support. They will help with pastoral support, anything you might need, just like I'm homesick, I don't want to be here anymore, any of that kind of stuff. Like they're there for you. They're going to help you make this transition. They can also help with some of the more practical things about opening a bank account, getting a job, extending your visa, any kind of passport issues, they can help with that. And then we also have the National Health Service. So if you are studying a degree over in the UK, as part of your visa process, you pay like the health copay upfront with that visa. I forget what it is, but it's maybe $1,000 or less for the whole of your degree. And that includes access to the health service. And then all of that is free. So God forbid you need anything, you break a leg or need surgery or whatever, all of that is free because it's covered under the NHS. And in Wales, even your prescriptions are free. In the rest of the UK, you have to pay a small copay, but in Wales, that is free. So it's a nice option. Most of our students do still continue to have their parents' insurance or some sort of a travel insurance to cover them as well. But if you are a full degree student, you are completely covered under the NHS. And then just so you can see kind of a little bit of how this looks structure-wise, we have 3 years of an undergraduate degree, and then 1 year optional for a master's. So the first year, because I know that's a bit weird when people are like, it's only 3 years, what's wrong? What are we missing? It just means we're not making you take a yoga class. We're not making you take that Spanish class. I remember having to take a full year of Spanish, a full year of geology, and I was an English major. So it just depends on the focus, but we do have this 3-year degree and it is more focused. But that being said, you don't have to know what you want to do with your life. You just have to know what you want to study. So it is focused in a subject area, but you don't actually focus in on like super, super detailed stuff until well into your degree. So the first year is core classes, really broad. You are going to study everything in psychology across the board, or bio, or ocean sciences, or creative studies, or music, or whatever you're doing. Really, really broad. So the idea there is also that if you start with something like neuropsychology and actually find out by the end of that year you're really interested in clinical psychology, it's fairly easy to make that switch because you're all doing the same core curriculum at the beginning. Second year, you start to do a few more specialist classes. There's a few more electives within your degree. Third year, you focus even more and you do an individual research project on exactly what you're interested in. And then there's that fourth year that you can step straight into and just do a 1-year master's. which tends to be 9 months of classes, projects, assignments, essays, and then 3 months of a research-focused dissertation, so a written up piece. Some institutions will have this as a 4-year package. The benefit there is if you know you want to do it, you only have to apply once, and it includes a visa for the whole of the 4 years. If you're not positive you want to do it, you can just stick to the 3, and then during your 3rd year, you can just apply for that master's, and they'll help you with the visa and all that kind of stuff. I'll just speed through this because I don't want to like drown you in details, but just some of the things to be aware of. There's a system called UCAS. It's kind of like the Common App for Europe. You can choose 5 institutions anywhere in Europe, and it's about $35, $40 or so to apply to those programs, so total. So it's a really low cost to apply to 5 universities. And you can choose which ones, and then you rank them like which your favorite choices are. And you fill out your applications, you upload your documents on UCAS, and it gets sent to those institutions. We also have direct applications. A bunch of universities are also on Common App. 4 of the Welsh universities are on Common App. So you can take a look at those lists as well and apply internationally using those pathways. There really aren't hard deadlines, but I tend to tell students use the middle or end of January as your deadline. Because while it is rolling admissions and it will stay open until August with a September start, I don't really recommend that. You want time to kind of sort out your accommodation and your visa and stuff. So yeah, try to get things in around January just so you know. But I mean, if you're ready, like I'm working with a student in California now, and she's about ready to apply. So she's going to apply in November. She'll probably know before Christmas if she's been accepted. It's a really quick turnaround for admissions. Some places can do it in 24 hours. Because like when I was at Bangor, I knew the admission stats. If an application came to me and had all the things that we needed, for most programs, I was approved to admit that student because this is what we needed. That person has that tick. Other ones had to go to the schools, if it was more specialist type knowledge or something, then we needed to suss out the things that they've studied before. It would go to the school to make the decision. So that could take a couple weeks to make a decision, but a couple weeks, not a couple months. And then there's no onus on you to respond to that right away. You can just sit on that. So at least before Christmas, you could know that you're in somewhere. It didn't cost you anything. It's no risk. And then you've got months to kind of figure out if you want to go, how that could work, what you want to do. And with all these institutions, you also get a year to defer it. So if you get in and you're like, I'm just not ready for that. I just want to work a bit, or I want to take a couple of community college classes and make sure this is the subject area I love, then you can defer. So just pass that on for a year. And you can come back the following year to do that degree. Entry requirements, we're looking at the basic things that your US institutions would as well. Combination of your high school diploma. We are all test flexible in Wales. In different universities in different countries will be different on that. Some are still test required. Because we focus so early in the UK on subject areas, AP and tests, well, we don't really do subject tests for SATs anymore, but those subject specific tests are still like the desired requirement because it's just so clear that you're qualified to study that subject at this level. But most of us are now looking specifically at your GPA, the level of classes you're taking, and your GPA in your subject area. So if you want to study chemistry and you failed gym, I don't really care. Like if you talk to the US manager at that institution, we'll work with you to like put together the look. So it's like, no, their major GPA is a 3.6. Overall, they might be a 3.2. But if you can say like they want to study psychology and all the subjects that have to do with that field are very strong, so therefore, you can kind of put that forward. Any tests you do have, great, we're glad to see them, but it's not necessarily a requirement. So the best thing in that situation is just reach out to your US manager, because every institution is going to have like a market manager that takes care of the US, and it's their job to kind of help you on this path. So we're looking for the GPA, we're looking for a personal statement and a reference letter. Personal statements are different, so make sure you Google that before you fill one out. It's more like a cover letter to a CV. It's like, I am good for this program. I'm interested in this degree. Here's why. Here's the experience that I've done, or the journals that I've read, or what got me interested in this. But it's very much like professional-esque. Yeah, so it's not about your mom. It's not about summer camp. It's like, I want to study this, and here's why. And then the reference letter, we only require one. You can include more if you'd like, if you have people that know you really well and can speak and vouch for your abilities, but the one that you submit really needs to be from somebody who can speak to your academic ability in that field. So if you're studying psychology, it needs to be your AP Psych professor or stats or, that work placement that you did over the summer, last summer, or something like that. It needs to be in that subject area to kind of vouch for your ability in that field. Because all of this is just to show us that you're going to be okay once you arrive in the UK. We want to make sure that you're academically sound and going to succeed and things like that. And then other aspects, if you're doing an art course or film or something like that, you might be asked to submit a portfolio or attend a virtual interview, especially performance and things like that. So just check university websites for requirements there. I totally just said all this, so don't worry, there's a slide if you need it. I can also pass this presentation along, so if it's helpful to have it access to it later, or you can watch the recording actually. Studies elsewhere, I just want to make sure I touch on this because you do have opportunities worldwide. Obviously, I'm very focused on Wales because that's my day job. That's where I went. I'm obsessed with it. It's wonderful. But you have a lot of options. If you're looking at Europe, generally it's really affordable. It's usually around $6,000 to $18,000 per year for tuition. Obviously, then you have to live, you have to add in living costs, and that will totally depend, So even in London, like, yeah, tuition might be $14,000 to $18,000 as well, but the living cost is going to be 4 times as much. So just kind of factor that into your planning, really. Most programs in Europe are 3 years, so very similar to the structure that I outlined in Wales, and there are a lot of programs in English. So don't think that you can't study in Germany because you don't speak German. There will be a lot of programs run through the medium of English. Canada, quite famous for its support for learning differences and disabilities. It's a lot closer to the US standards of support for that. So if that's a concern for you, it's just nice to be aware of that. I will say also in the UK, disabilities is a thing that you declare on your application. And I was only like 2 years ago, I was talking to some admissions officers in California who said that their students were terrified to disclose that in the US institutions because that would affect their outcome. Baffled me. That is definitely not the case in international education. It's on there so we can then prepare ourselves as an institution for whatever you might need support in. So we can make a plan before you arrive. So like we have a whole dyslexia unit at Bangor University, and we have professional note takers on staff that can take notes for students that need note taking. We had a student come, I don't remember how long ago, 5 years, 7 years. He's blind and wanted to study music. So he applied 2 years ahead of time, couldn't get the full like unconditional acceptance until his final semester of senior year, so we could see the grades and everything. But we're pretty confident he was a very good student and was going to be accepted. So that gave the university a ton of lead time to buy the software that they needed, to teach the professors how to use that software so they could better implement it with the student. And then the student also arrived like 6 weeks early. So he and his guide dog could get to know the whole town and how to get to class and things like that. So like all of that was just to build this system that would help him. So never worry or reach out to your US manager again at that institution to ask them about it. But yeah, it doesn't affect your admissions decision. It's just so we can prepare. Okay, back to Canada. There are a lot of affordable options there. So the US is really the only place in the world that charges what they charge for some of the tuition. So just be aware, looking outside, it's more regular to find an affordable education. Speedy processing times for study permits, easy immigration process is a good reputation for that. And also a lot of nations offer medical degrees in 6 years. I just want to note that down. I should also add to this, and MBAs are only 1 year in most countries, and many do not require work experience. In the US, if you want to do an MBA, you usually need 5 years work experience before doing your 2-year MBA. In the UK, at any of the top tier institutions, you need a bachelor's degree, and then you can do a 1-year MBA. Completely equal degree. I don't know the detail of why that is. The main thing I've been told is just that there's more opportunity in space, so it's less competitive, but just as excellent of a course. Medical degrees, you'll need to see how that would transfer back to your home state, home country, whatever you're doing, but start that Google process now. There's lots of doctors that move from the UK to the US or Canada to the US and have to get recertified. So there's usually a straight pathway on what that looks like. Just make sure that you're aware of it, because you have to go back to school for 4 years when you go back, kind of defeats the purpose, but just be aware of that. But yeah, degrees can be way faster. Law degrees as well. Law degrees can be 3 years total in some places, and add on 1 or 2 years of a master's. And that would be equivalent to being a lawyer in the US. So yeah, just lots of different ways to think about some of these programs. Other opportunities, just a couple of examples here of universities overseas. So Bangor University is where I went in Wales. It says many majors in English, all of our majors are in English. The other thing is you have the option of taking some in Welsh. So for our Welsh students, they have the option of taking their courses in Welsh, but do not worry, they're all in English. We have a 3-year undergrad, optional 1-year grad, and about £15,000 a year, but it's actually dropped a little bit. So it's more like $14,000 to $18,000. And then we've got examples here from Hungary, Milan, and New Zealand, all showing you kind of the affordability of those areas. 3 years instead of 4, medical school in 6 years. So just kind of changes the way that you think about these things and how much money you could potentially save as well by doing 3 years instead of 4. So lots of options. And as I've mentioned, you can use FAFSA and 529 plans overseas. Hundreds of international universities accept FAFSA. It is loans only, not the grants. So it is a little bit more limited in the amount that you get. But I think I got something like 24,000, which more than covered, my tuition and some living costs in Bangor. But then I became an RA, so I didn't pay rent, and I got a part-time job at a movie theater, so that paid for my groceries, and I had a fair bit left over that let me travel and see the world, things like that. I also paid for my tuition on a credit card that gave me air miles, so I flew back and forth like 4 times a year for free, which was pretty great. So lots of loopholes and tricks that I think a lot of us have found that we share with other international students. I'm not going to pause there yet because I realized I didn't also say something that I really wanted to, was this is not the only option. I feel like when you hear the degrees abroad, it can be so exciting. Like you have a lot of options. There's so many different things. And that can be really exciting. But sometimes you're not necessarily ready for this either. I was not. I was pre-med when I went into undergrad. I was dead set to become an orthopedic surgeon. Spoiler, my degree was in film. My PhD is in film. So I went very different. I needed liberal arts to kind of figure out where my passions were and where my skills were. So if you're not quite ready for this kind of focus or to go overseas because you just aren't ready, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But I really hope you open your eyes to this opportunity, because every single university, like I'm going to say 98% of the universities in the United States will have a study abroad office, and you can go abroad for a semester or a year or a 2-week summer program. There's so many different ways to get overseas, and university is the best time to do that because you have so much support, financial and just personal. And it just can expand your horizons in such a safe way. So strongly encourage you to look at study abroad. It basically just means you become a student for a semester on that other campus. So I went to Bangor University for my semester abroad, and I took 4 classes, and the credits from that 4 classes transferred back to Mary Washington. So I didn't lose any time. And I ended up having this incredible experience and meeting a professor who became my master's supervisor, getting a part-time job, getting an RA, then meeting somebody who helped put together my PhD proposal, and then getting some funding for that. And yeah, and the road goes ever on. So I see I've got one question. I am going to go to this, and I know Jasmine needs to wrap up at the end, but we definitely still have some time. So let me check the question. Is an IB diploma a must, or can you just take a couple of IB classes? You can absolutely just take a few classes, and IB is not required either. If your school doesn't offer IB, if you haven't done IB, that is fine. Whatever you have done, we will work with. So the best thing you can do is reach out to that US manager or the admissions office at that institution and say, here's my transcript. Here's what I'm interested in studying. What do you think? I would say the biggest hurdle we run into is just demonstrating ability. So if you've only taken honors classes at high school level and they're very general, what your high school requires you to take, that can be a little tough to prove that you have the kind of higher level that is required for UK education. So often I'll encourage folks to take like an online community college class or a summer placement If they're willing to take an AP, great, but not required. So just kind of things like that. It's just like, how can we better show your abilities in that area? So IB is fantastic. If they're doing a full IB diploma, you don't need anything else. We will just look at the IB diploma, and they'll look at the score on the IB, and they'll look at the subject specific scores within that for the whatever course they want to study. So yeah, if you're doing full IB, great. You don't have to worry about ACTs, SATs, GPAs, none of that stuff. If you're taking a few IB classes, we'll totally look at that, because that's right up there with an AP class in terms of like weight, you know? So if you're an A student in all of your IB or AP classes, that tells me you're a pretty strong applicant, you know? Excuse me. So I hope that answers your question on that. Just generally. There we go. I think that's it for Q&A. Is there anything else people would like to ask a question about, or any other points you want me to talk a little bit more or circle back to if you came in a little bit late? Feel free. I'll try to think of some sum up things before I pass back to Jasmine to wrap up. But I mean, I think just the main thing I say, because I feel like these opportunities to like hear about other stuff is just really exciting, but can also be a little bit overwhelming. The main thing I say at these situations is just take a look at the offerings, then take a look at the location and the program. So like offerings, okay, this looks cool, you know, I'm really interested in this. This sounds like something that could be viable and I want to consider. That Bangor University looked awfully nice. I think I'm going to take a look at that. So then fall down that rabbit hole with Bangor University or whichever university you choose. Watch all the YouTube videos, go for a walk on Google Maps, you know, get a feel for the space, see how far away it is from the airport. Is it country? Is it city? Do you like it? Do the same thing with the program. Take a look at the creative writing program you want to apply to. Look at the student profiles, look at the classes that you take each year. So really just get to know the program and the location. If you like those two things, apply. Fill out the application. It's free or very, very cheap. You'll know very quickly if you've been accepted or not. And do not worry about any of the other stuff yet, because once you're accepted, we'll walk you through the visa process. We'll walk you through the housing process. We'll pick you up at the airport, bring you back to your dorm. We'll carry your suitcase up the stairs. Like, it's the first time for you to do something that's so different like this, but it's not the first time for us. And it's been the millionth time for most of these institutions. So try not to get, overwhelmed in the details. I think people hear things like visas and they're like, I don't know what that means. It's a government form. It's annoying. It's a lot of paperwork, but you know the answers. It's very straightforward. And you only have to do it once, and then it's good for the duration of your degree. And we'll walk you through it. Like every campus has somebody that is kind of a specialist in visa processing, so they'll answer any questions you've got. And it is a pretty straightforward process. So don't stress about visas. You can't even apply for them until June before your September start. I also don't know if I mentioned that. We start in September, we end in May. So it's very similar to the US structure. We just start a bit later. So we tend to start at the end of September, break for Christmas. We get 3 weeks at Easter, and then tend to wrap up exams by the middle of May. And then you get the summer off as well. So, right. I think I will wrap up there. Are there any other questions from folks? As you can see, my contact details are there. Please do reach out if you have any questions for me. I'm also supposed to mention something. Let me pull it up. At 5 o'clock, there's a 6x6 session. So that means that you can come talk to 6 institutions from overseas. So that's starting in just 20 minutes. So if you want to pop into that session, there's going to be a couple of different universities talking about their programs and opportunities as well. So I hope this was helpful for you, and enjoy the rest of your fair. But I'm going to pass it back to Jasmine to wrap up.
Thank you, Dr. Parke. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing that information. So that concludes the end of our fair today. But as Dr. Maggie Parke shared, definitely if you have time, feel free to join the next session. Before I close up, I do just want to plug that as you exit this Zoom session, a survey will appear. It's approximately 5 questions or so, but please complete the survey. It's extremely helpful for us as we aim to improve our college fair offerings in the future. I also want to remind you that you can access this recording by visiting scribescan.com/COSI. Again, thank you, Dr. Maggie Parke, but also thank you to all of our attendees. I hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks very much.